These charities include the British Red Cross, CARE, Oxfam, Save the Children and World Vision.
Their teams are working on the ground in Ukraine and neighbouring countries to bring vital aid to those who need it most. If you can spare it, your gift to the DEC's humanitarian appeal will go a really long way.
£10 provides essential hygiene supplies for a person for a month.
£50 provides blankets for 4 families.
£100 provides emergency food for 2 families per month.
It's easy to give. You can donate online at dec.org.uk or call the 24-hour donation line on 0370 60 60 900. If you prefer to send a cheque, please post it to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal, PO Box 999, London, EC 3A 3AA. To give £10 on your mobile, simply text the word crisis to 70150. Standard network charges apply for calls and you must be 16 or over. Texts are charged at the standard network rate and your £10 donation will be added to your bill.
100% of your donation goes directly to the DEC to save lives and deliver critical support where it's needed. Hello there, happy Friday to you. It's 6 o'clock, I'm Michelle Dewberry and this is Dewbs & Co, the show where we'll get into some of the things that have got you talking today. Now, of course, the war in Ukraine continues. Boris Johnson has been sharing a stage with the German Chancellor, Olaf Scholz, pledging more aid, more weapons, more sanctions, etc., etc. Now, you've got Finland are on the cusp of applying to NATO. Russia have warned them that this may see the destruction of their country. Got me wondering, is peace in Europe a thing of the past? And there's been news today that Chancellor Rishi Sunak held a US green card until more than a year into his time at 11 Downing Street. What are your thoughts on that? Many people are furious. Are you? And in an exclusive interview with GBNews set to air tomorrow, Boris Johnson said that he won't rule out locking us all down again if needed. Gotta say, this made my heart sink because I personally think full lockdown should never, ever be again considered. Am I wrong? And average house prices are going up, aren't they, sky high, making them unaffordable to many. In Canada, they're experiencing the same problem and they're looking at introducing a ban on foreign people buying homes there in a bid to keep the prices down. Should the UK be looking to introduce something similar? And let me ask you this, is good customer service a thing of the past? I can't help but wonder. So many companies these days seem to use COVID as an excuse to provide service, which quite frankly is appalling. Do you think it's acceptable? I don't. We'll have all that and more, but first of all, the latest news headlines.
Thanks, Michelle. Good afternoon. I'm Bethany Elsey in the GB newsroom. The UK is sending a further £100 million worth of high-grade military equipment to Ukraine's armed forces. The Prime Minister says the weapons will include anti-aircraft and anti-tank missiles. The announcement follows a Russian rocket attack, which killed at least 50 people, including 5 children in eastern Ukraine. More than 100 others were injured when a railway station in the city of Kramatorsk was targeted. 2 missiles struck as people were trying to evacuate the area. One had the words "for the children" painted on it. The Kremlin denies any involvement in the attack, and Boris Johnson says evidence of war crimes are mounting and Ukraine's allies are doing more to help the country.
Today I can announce that the UK will send a further £100 million worth of high-grade military equipment to Ukraine's armed forces, including more Starstreak anti-aircraft missiles, which fly at 3 times the speed of sound, another 800 anti-tank missiles, and precision munitions capable of lingering in the sky until directed to their target. The Europe we knew just 6 weeks ago no longer exists. Putin's invasion strikes at the very foundations of the security of our continent.
The Chancellor has admitted he held a US green card while in office. Rishi Sunak became the Chancellor in February 2020 but held the permanent residency card until around October. He says it was returned after he sought guidance and he followed all laws and rules and paid taxes in full. He's been under growing pressure after it emerged that his multi-millionaire wife, Akshata Murthy, holds non-dom status, which exempts her from paying tax on foreign income. The man who killed Sabina Nessa has been sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 36 years. Kochi Salamanch from Eastbourne, who pleaded guilty to murder, attacked the school teacher in a park in southeast London last September. The judge said it was cowardly for Salamanch to refuse to attend his sentencing, but said he had no power to force him. Senior investigating officer DCI Neil John says it was vital to catch him before he could attack another victim.
I've described him previously as an evil coward. I maintain that. As a human being, I'm appalled by the level of violence that he inflicted on Sabina. And I think as a police officer, I'm relieved that the team have been able to track, trace, apprehend and prosecute him in a timely manner.
Israel's Prime Minister says the Palestinian gunman who attacked a bar in Tel Aviv had accomplices. At least 3 people were killed and several others injured when the attacker opened fire in a pub in a crowded area. He was later shot dead by Israeli security forces. It's the latest in a series of deadly attacks in the country. At least 13 people have been killed over the past 2 weeks. 3-time Wimbledon champion Boris Becker has been found guilty of 4 charges under the Insolvency Act at Southwark Crown Court. The charges relating to his 2017 bankruptcy included the removal of property, 2 counts of failing to disclose estate and concealing debt. He was acquitted of a further 20 counts. He's been bailed ahead of sentencing later this month. The Queen has pulled out of the annual Royal Monday Church service. It's the first time Her Majesty, who's been experiencing mobility issues, will miss the event. She'll be represented by Prince Charles, who will attend the service at St George's Chapel at Windsor Castle next Thursday. Airports and airlines have been criticised by the Civil Aviation Authority for failing to recruit enough staff to meet the recent demand for passenger travel. The body's chief executive, Richard Moriarty, has condemned disruption experienced by passengers trying to get away for the Easter holidays. He says late notice cancellations and excessive delays are distressing for customers and have the potential to impact confidence levels across the industry. Today, Manchester Airport has asked passengers to prepare for long queues and arrive 3 hours before their flight. On TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Now, it's back to Dewbs & Co.
Thanks for that, Bethany. Well, keeping me company here until 7 o'clock tonight. My panel, we've got Peter Whittle, who's the director at the New Culture Forum, Piers Ben, who's a philosopher, and Jonathan Steele, an international affairs journalist. And you know the drill on Dewbs & Co by now. It's not just about us here. No, it is not. It is about you at home as well and your thoughts. What is on your mind tonight? You can get in touch with me on email, gbviews@gbnews.uk. You can tweet me at Michelle Dewbs or at GB News. Don't forget, of course, you can subscribe to us on YouTube. All the best bits are there. You can watch us live, watch us back. We've got an app and we are on the radio as well, DAB+, wherever you are watching or listening. Good evening to you. You're very, very welcome. Now, our top story, Boris Johnson has announced that Britain will send an additional £100 million worth of weapons for Ukraine. It comes after dozens of people, including children, died when a crowded railway station in eastern Ukraine was hit by rockets. Boris Johnson was speaking at a Downing Street press conference earlier this afternoon with the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz. Let's listen.
Today I can announce that the UK will send a further £100 million worth of high-grade military equipment to Ukraine's armed forces, including more Starstreak anti-aircraft missiles, which fly at 3 times the speed of sound, another 800 anti-tank missiles, and precision munitions capable of lingering in the sky until directed to their target.
Now, at that press conference, the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz said that his country was working hard to end the reliance on Russian gas imports, but he also added that it wasn't feasible for Germany to replace Russian gas immediately.
Nicht mehr importiert werden wird. Und bei der Gelegenheit würde ich Ihnen gerne klar und deutlich sagen, Deutschland ist längst dabei, sich aus seinen Abhängigkeiten von diesen Importen zu befreien, indem wir alles dafür tun, andere Lieferanten zu finden und indem wir in großem Maßstab investieren, um die technischen und physikalischen Infrastrukturen zu etablieren, die notwendig sind, um zum Beispiel Gas über die norddeutschen Küsten importieren zu können und die inländischen Pipelines zu verlegen.
Now, you know, we've got a war in Europe, we've got NATO considering how they're getting involved, and Germany doing their best but having some of their hands tied because of a dependency on Russian oil and gas. Who could have foresaw that coming? Donald Trump, of course.
But Germany is totally controlled by Russia because they were getting from 60 to 70% of their energy from Russia and a new pipeline. And you tell me if that's appropriate, because I think it's not. And I think it's a very bad thing for NATO, and I don't think it should have happened.
You got to say, whatever you think of Donald Trump, he spoke a lot of sense there. Jonathan Steele, I mean, there is so much to unpick on the latest goings on in Ukraine. I mean, where do we even begin? We've got more and more money, more and more weapons, more and more conversation about weaning ourselves, well, not ourselves, Germany, more to the point, off Russian oil and gas. And, you know, you've got Finland, for example, talking about submitting membership, requesting membership to NATO imminently, if not by the end of May. Russia have turned around and said that will be the end, or they will destroy Finland if that happens. Do you think peace in Europe, is that the end of it for now?
Well, it is certainly very far away, but I wish there would be more talk about it, and I'm glad you're talking about it here tonight, because Olaf Scholz is one of the few people who can talk to Putin and to Biden, of course, and so is the French president. We want these peace talks to succeed. We want a ceasefire. Best way to stop this killing is to have a ceasefire on both sides. And it seemed at one time that the gap between the two, Ukraine and Russia, on talks wasn't that big. Ukraine was saying we're willing to give up the ambition to join NATO, we'll be neutral instead. That's very much in line with what Putin has been saying. He's also talked about kicking into touch, if you like, the sovereignty issues over Crimea and eastern Ukraine, saying we can talk about that sometime during the next 15 years. So actually the gap is quite narrow, and I think it would be much better if people like Boris Johnson and Joe Biden would talk much more about peace and encourage the French and German presidents to really get the two sides talking to each other, or if not through mediation, to find out what the real differences between them are, which could be bridged.
Yeah, Piers, I mean, it is, the talk seems to be continually on more weapons, which in my mind, granted and admittedly as a non-foreign conflicts expert nonetheless, but to me, you're pumping weapons in, you're just extending, elongating this situation. I don't understand why more and more people are not focused on organising peace talks. Why isn't the objective, the loud objective, Zelensky, Putin in a room together to try and fix this?
Well, it looks as though Emmanuel Macron has been talking to Putin for quite a long time, quite regularly. Presumably he's trying to broker some sort of, some way of getting Putin to see sense. But the trouble with peace talks is we all want peace. We're in a very, very dangerous situation. This is unprecedented in my lifetime. You know, I don't remember the Cuban Missile Crisis, and I imagine that's the closest we got to it. But we are dealing with an extremely dangerous man in Vladimir Putin, and he's not going to give anything up unless he has to. So yes, let's do all we can to stop things escalating, but let's also do what we can to rescue the Ukrainians from the ghastly situation that they're in. And Putin's not going to be talked out of that. He has to be forced or threatened. Now, I don't know whether he can be. I mean, it's not a done deal at all, unfortunately, that Ukraine is going to win this war. They might win it in parts and not in other parts. It's a very dangerous situation. But yes, of course, peace, but you have to negotiate from strength, unfortunately.
Yeah, Peter, do you think the UK is doing enough? Did you see this kind of press conference today? Yet more money, yet more weapons, yet more sanctions?
Yes, I mean, I have been very impressed by Britain's response up till now, and indeed remains so. I was pleased to hear what Boris Johnson said today. I think that it shouldn't be, I mean, he sort of slightly framed it as though it was in response to the atrocities we've seen. I think it should be ongoing. I think it should intensify. When it comes to peace talks, fine. Who is not going to agree to peace talks? Of course. But the fact is that the war, as I can see it in Ukraine, is in fact entering a very important stage, a crucial stage. So we have got to do everything we can to help the Ukrainians hold the line. The only other thing I would say, by the way, is that the idea of peace talk and also some kind of, compromise, or whatever that might be, I think that when the Ukrainians see what the Russians have done during this war, they're less likely to feel like compromising, actually. And I think that we should be with them on that.
And Jonathan, we heard the news yesterday, I think it was, that Russia have now been kicked off the UN Human Rights Council. How significant is that? Is it relevant? Will it make any difference? Will Putin care in your mind?
Well, I think it's significant psychologically because it's a blow to Russia's international image that so many countries have voted first to condemn the invasion and secondly now to kick them off the UN Human Rights Council. But it won't change Putin's mind. I mean, sanctions are much more likely to change his mind than this kind of thing, which is more symbolic than substantive.
Yeah, and I mean, we say that sanctions, Piers, are likely to change his mind, but he doesn't seem to be changing his mind that much at all.
Well, we have to ask what the purpose of sanctions actually is. I mean, one idea that's been touted is that you make the Russian people suffer from these sanctions so that eventually they'll turn against their glorious leader. The evidence I'm aware of seems to be that Putin is, in fact, popular in Russia, and that if ordinary people are hurt by sanctions, they will see themselves and their regime as victimized and will support the regime even more. Yes. That leads to one great danger. The real point of sanctions must be to cripple the regime financially, and as part of a war effort, to stop them being able to use it on military equipment and on soldiers, and so all the things they need for their war machine. Gas seems to be an effective way to do that for two reasons. One is that we need to wean ourselves off gas anyway, in my opinion, though I know that's not everyone agrees with that. The other is that Russia is a major supplier of gas, and that if there's a concerted and coordinated effort to cut off to stop buying Russian gas, that could have an impact, if not on the morale, certainly on the capacity of the Russian regime. But I don't know whether it would be effective. It's just one idea among many that is being touted.
Peter, Clive just emailed in now saying, and I'll quote directly, Michelle, I'm not saying we shouldn't help countries or the people within them, but he asks, why can we always find the money to help them out over and over again when we have many of our own people living in poverty?
Well, in a way, you should be able to do both, I would say to that gentleman. I don't think it's a slightly false dichotomy in a way. But I think that the situation here, for me, is quite cut and dried, actually. And
what do you mean by that?
Well, a country has been the victim of an aggressor. No one, I think, doubts that. I mean, or at least there are some people, of course, who doubt it. But I mean, they're on the fringes, if you like. And it behoves us to actually help. And I think we have done that well. And when you look at, for example, and hear about, on an anecdotal basis, the stories of Ukrainians fighting, how pleased and grateful they are to Britain for helping, that is very good to hear. It's very good. But I think we should absolutely keep that up. And I think that there are other things where you could get money to help poor people here, in answer to your caller there. I think that there are many other ways one could get money to help people, which, come from different sources of waste, if you like.
Yeah, and Jonathan, I mean, all of this is kind of your area of expertise. Peter just saying, this is a very cut and dry, very, simple kind of simple situation, if you like, very clear cut. Do you agree with that?
Well, no, it's not at all clear cut. I think it's very complex and there are many different tendencies pushing in different directions. But I come back to my first point, which is the main thing is to stop the fighting. And that's not going to be done by putting pressure entirely on Putin. It means getting the peace talks going and finding what the real differences between them are I mean, obviously, morally and psychologically, one feels one wants to help these people, but one also has to draw and keep in mind, are we escalating simply? Are we just prolonging the war? Will we make it more of a kind of stalemate, which both sides keep increasing their aggression on each other? I mean, not aggression by Ukraine, but their attacks on the Russian forces, and not ending the war at all. End the war is the crucial thing, because already a quarter of Ukraine's population is living outside either their country or their home altogether as homeless people. And more cities are going to be destroyed. There won't be anything to go back to for the refugees if and when the war does stop, if we go on escalating all the time and just keep the fighting at the boiling point.
Yes, but can I just come back to that? So, yes, you say that the main thing is to stop the fighting. Yes, that is true, but at what cost? You can't just sort of, when you say stop the fighting, yes, we all want to stop the fighting. It's a very, admirable sentiment, but, at what cost and to whom? I mean, you can't, what would you accept if it meant stopping the fighting? What would you accept?
Well, I could ask the same question to you. What does it mean, at what cost, to go on escalating, sending more weapons?
No, I would say, why is it called escalating? Why is it called escalating when the Ukrainians, seems to me, have shown such extraordinary courage and resilience, right? And it seems to be unfailing. So we should support them in that.
Well, I think there's always been a moral argument for not fighting a war if you know you can't win it. A very difficult argument to swallow, actually, because it's part of just war tradition going back centuries. Because if you fight a war you can't win, then there's going to be a cost of lives. But there's also a principle of resisting aggression. And you can always end the war by just not fighting. And then the result is that you are then dominated by the person you're...
Well, of course, that's not even an option.
Well, I agree. I'm saying you can do it.
I mean, should we just have put down arms in 1940 or whatever?
That's just my point. Yeah.
Well, I tell you, I worry slightly, I've got to say, about the whole kind of Finland ambitions to join NATO and what the implications and ramifications of that will be. Right, just going to return, just park Ukraine for now and just talk about the goings-on in this country. I'll show you a couple of front pages this morning. For those of you that are listening, not watching, I'm holding up the Times newspaper. The headline there is Sunak fears revelations over wife for a hit job. I'm going to hold up the Telegraph now. Sunak allies claim number 10 is undermining the Chancellor. Now, it makes me chuckle. Sorry, I held out so fast, and just as you were zooming in, I whipped it away from you. But anyway, I've read it out, so you get the gist. Now, the reason it makes me chuckle is because things have kind of escalated since those headlines were produced, and now Rishi Sunak is under fire again this evening, this time after admitting holding a US green card whilst he was the UK Chancellor. The green card, of course, allows permanent residence in the USA. Rishi Sunak said it's because he's lived and worked in America, and again, he accuses his critics of running a smear campaign against his family. Pierce, has he done anything wrong in your mind?
In having a green card?
Well, no, in being the Chancellor.
Oh, I see.
In being the Chancellor, I mean, anyone could, well, not anyone, but green cards are green cards. This specifically is about being the Chancellor of the UK while simultaneously holding a US green card.
Yeah, well, that's what I understood your question to be. I mean, I suppose, what is the problem supposed to be about having a green card? A green card, as I understand it, allows you residence, permanent residence, or at least very a long period of residence in the United States, and they're very hard to get, and they're much coveted. I suppose there might be suspicion that Sunak is thinking of fleeing to the United States for some reason eventually, or that he's not committed to this country. Maybe that's the worry about it. But I haven't yet been told why it's a problem in itself. I mean, we could always ask why he wants a green card, why he wanted one. Why does he have a green card? It might be worth asking about.
Well, he used to live and work there, didn't he? So that's kind of, he used to have a business there. Yeah. That's kind of where the origins of all this came from. Yeah. Just to kind of give some dates to this, by the way, in case you're wondering, he was, of course, Rishi was elected for the first time in 2015, and then he became the Chancellor in Feb 2020, and he held his green card until October 2021. Peter, your thoughts?
I'm, really with Piers on this. I think this is a bit of kind of skullduggery that is being very effective, actually. Whoever's got it, in for him, it might actually well come from his own side. I mean, it might come from, within the power base itself, people who don't like the Chancellor. I'm just trying to work out quite what is so wrong about this. I mean, you know, maybe I'm being terribly out of touch here, but if he had a green card, not only is it not against the law, but I mean, I can't, you know, so in a way, so what did he have?
Well, according to the Lib Dem leader, Sir Ed Davey, he's saying, how could the man responsible for UK tax policy regard any permanent residence status for the US as acceptable? He goes on to say this would be a huge conflict of interest and a serious breach of the ministerial code.
Of course it's not. No,
see,
it's not.
Jonathan, this seems to me to be a little bit fishy. I mean, people's nickname for Rishi used to be Dishy Rishi, it's now Fishy Rishi. And to me, this smacks of a little bit, you know, he's saying it's a smear campaign. I agree with him. Don't forget, not that long ago, there was an almost kind of partial coup attempt against Boris Johnson over parties in his back garden. This all got distracted, of course, given the situation in Ukraine. But Rishi was regarded by many as the kind of front runner to take his place. And now we're seeing, yesterday, of course, the non-dom stuff. Today we're seeing green card. You know, Lord only knows what it'll be tomorrow. Do you think this is kind of political manoeuvring?
I think it's undoubtedly political manoeuvring. But I think we have to be careful not to be confusing apples with oranges. I mean, it's one thing for his wife to pay to have non-dom status to avoid paying tax in this country. That is unconscionable. I think it's hypocritical and terrible indictment of their values, he and his wife. Whereas having a green card is nothing special wrong with that. I mean, there are a lot of people in this country who have double citizenship. They have US passports, which is more than a US green card, as well as having a British passport. And there are all kinds of tax arrangements to avoid double taxation, to avoid being taxed in both the US and Britain. So it's a recognised issue, the dual citizenship or green card. But so I think there is a hit job going on to try and turn that into something scandalous. But the other issue, the non-dom, really is serious, and it's great that people are going after him for that.
Do you think? See, I don't know, maybe I'm like missing the point, but I don't think either are serious. And I think that, you know, especially in this non-dom stuff, Jonathan, it appears that no rules were broken. And if people don't like the non-dom setup, that's absolutely legitimate. But then they could have changed the non-dom setup years ago. It's been in place for decades and decades, and it's spanned multiple governments of multiple colours. So it all just seems a bit peculiar to me. Peter, you want to come in?
Yes, I mean, I think it's a rather sort of bad route to go down, actually. I mean, you know, in the sense that, for example, yesterday we had, you know, about his wife, everything is above board. There's nothing wrong there. But when people start, or opponents, or those who are rivals, start to pick on people's family, you know, you go down a very dark route, not just financially, it could go over into their private behaviour, in all of these things. And frankly, it shows that, I would say, that they haven't got many good political arguments against them.
Well, yeah, actually, that's an interesting point because who is it who's just emailed in? Sorry, my emails. Oh, yeah, there you go. Bernard's emailed in saying the opposition is so weak, they're going to try anything to get rid of Boris. Sunak's spokesperson said, by the way, in a nutshell, he's followed all the rules, didn't do anything wrong. He filed his US tax returns, but as a non-resident in compliance with the law. They go on to say that under US law, you are not presumed to be a US resident just by dint of holding a green card. Let me know your thoughts about that. Georgia has said, I couldn't care less about him having a green card, Michelle. I see this as another smear by the media. I've got to say that sense is really coming through quite strongly. Carl has written in, I think this is an interesting point you raised here, Carl, saying, Michelle, who was in the wardrobe department at GBNews yesterday? He looked like a QR code, and today he looked like a disco ball. Oh, Carl, that's a bit harsh. I shall have a word with myself. It's me. I manage my own clothes, and it's Friday. So if you're listening, not watching, I've got a little bit of glitter going on. Why not? It's almost the weekend, that's what I say. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to discuss Boris Johnson. He has refused to rule out more lockdowns in the future. Oh, goodness me, have we learned nothing? I would never want to go through another lockdown again. I don't think they should even be considered. Am I wrong? I'll see you in a couple of minutes.
Europe is in the grip of the most devastating humanitarian crisis since World War II.
The people of Ukraine are facing unimaginable suffering
as their homes are destroyed and their loved ones are killed.
Millions of people are being forced to flee for their lives, carrying only their children, their pets, and the clothes on their back.
The pain, loss and destruction grows by the day.
The people of Ukraine urgently need our help.
Already a vast humanitarian operation is underway. Britain's Disasters Emergency Committee, or DEC, brings together 15 leading aid charities to respond to overseas disasters quickly and efficiently. These charities include the British Red Cross, CARE, Oxfam, Save the Children and World Vision.
Their teams are working on the ground in Ukraine and neighbouring countries to bring vital aid to those who need it most. If you can spare it, your gift to the DEC's humanitarian appeal will go a really long way.
£10 provides essential hygiene supplies for a person for a month.
£50 provides blankets for 4 families.
£100 provides emergency food for 2 families per month.
It's easy to give. You can donate online at dec.org.uk or call the 24-hour donation line on 0370 60 60 900. If you prefer to send a cheque, please post it to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal, PO Box 999, London, EC 3A 3AA. To give £10 on your mobile, simply text the word crisis to 70150. Standard network charges apply for calls and you must be 16 or over. Texts are charged at the standard network rate and your £10 donation will be added to your bill.
100% of your donation goes directly to the DEC to save lives and deliver critical support where it's needed. Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry. A reminder as to who's keeping me company in the studio tonight till 7. We've got Peter Whittle, who's the director of the New Culture Forum, Piers Ben, who's a philosopher, and Jonathan Steele, who's an international affairs journalist. Now, Prime Minister Boris Johnson has refused to rule out another lockdown should Britain be hit by another COVID pandemic. He said the government has to get the balance right with prioritising public health and saving lives. Got to say, he was speaking exclusively to GBNews with Esther McVey and Philip Davies. You can watch Esther McVey and Philip Davies' exclusive interview with Boris Johnson tomorrow morning. How exciting. This is during their Saturday selection from 10 a.m. I know where I'm going to be watching this. Let's take a little look.
I can't rule out something, Esther. I can't, say that we wouldn't be forced to do non-pharmaceutical interventions again of the kind that we did. I think it would be irresponsible of any leader, in any democracy, to say that they're going to rule out something that could save life.
Well, there you go. You can thank me later. I've just sorted out your Saturday morning, 10 o'clock tomorrow. Just a reminder, that's that interview. Let me start with you, Peter. Let's talk about lockdowns. Boris Johnson, they're basically saying that they should be on the table to be considered. Should they?
I think he's just, in an odd way, maybe not to take this too seriously, in the sense that, being a politician, he's not going to, take any hostages to fortune, and he's not going to rule anything out. It would be the vote loser, I think, quite rightly, to end, all vote losers if he did something like that.
Really?
Yes, I think so. I think one of the problems with what happened with lockdown is that now it's been introduced as a possible answer or solution to any form of problem like this that might arise. Not just sort of like another COVID, but any other kind of very strong disease or any particular situation. We say, we'll just simply lock down. People are now used to it. I think that the damage that was done by lockdown was just incalculable. And I use that advisedly, that word, because actually we still don't know, and we won't actually know maybe for maybe another generation when it comes to children, first of all. But what I would say is that there was a report quite recently, I think it was about a month ago, for a North American report, which basically said that lockdowns did not really make a significant difference in the end. And I think that, in terms of deaths and in terms of spreading.
Yeah, I think you're talking about, is it the John Hopkins, this is me off the top of my head, the John Hopkins University that said they came out and said actually the restrictions made something like 0.2% difference to death rates.
However, Michelle, you could say, in fact, it's not quite as simple as that. It could, because there are going to be things coming through down the line as a result of lockdown, which show that maybe they were more destructive than even that. So I think it would be an appalling prospect. Also, you know, we have to remember, like we need to, just how appalling it was for 2 years. And in terms of depression for people and...
Of course, but Jonathan Peter says that actually he thinks that this would be a vote loser for Boris Johnson if we were to ever go into lockdown again. But certainly I wouldn't even actually follow a lockdown. I know I shouldn't admit that, but I probably wouldn't. No. But nonetheless, there are lots of people that agree with lockdowns, that do think they're necessary and that they shouldn't be ruled out in the future. Your thoughts?
Well, I'm one of those people. I'm afraid I won't be able to watch the interview tomorrow at 10 o'clock, so I'll be on the tennis court, I hope, if it's not raining.
Well, luckily for you, Jonathan,
I do agree with Boris Johnson on this point, not agree with him on many other points, but on this one he's right. You don't want to rule things out indefinitely in the future, because we never know what's coming down the track. So to keep it as a last resort or on the table, whatever cliche you want to use, is a good thing, obviously. And I think if people interpret his statement as meaning he's keen on having a lockdown, then they're wrong for that. He doesn't want to have a lockdown unless it's absolutely necessary and advised by the medical authorities. Oh, yeah, but come on, when we say about advised by the medical authorities, I mean, when we look at some of the things like the predictions that people like Sage made, in terms of, you know, predictions of what cases could look like versus the actual reality of them, they were miles apart. And Piers, my concern with this, I don't know where you stand on lockdowns, but for me personally, I've got huge concerns about the unintended consequences of lockdown.
We're all concerned about that. The thing about Sage and the projections was they did say they were putting forward a worst-case scenario. They didn't say it was going to happen. And they did have good reason at the time on the available evidence for putting forward that worst-case scenario. The general point about lockdown, but the first point is Boris Johnson is not a very credible source, because he said in the past that he doesn't want to do more lockdowns, or he says he doesn't believe he's going to have to do them. He just undermines himself every time he changes his mind. But leaving Johnson's unreliability aside, the problem with the whole thing, and I just recorded 2 podcasts on this exact issue, the ethical issues, is we have several conflicting principles, and there's no overarching way to resolve the conflict. So we have do no harm. That's a basic principle of medical ethics. Clearly, lockdowns militate in favour of that principle, because people might otherwise die in large numbers, the NHS might be overwhelmed. But as you also implied, this is where it gets difficult, personal autonomy with respect to your own decisions, all the problems of those who are worst impacted by the lockdown, children, the dying, the elderly, people who couldn't go to church or mosque, all these. Of course, these are enormous costs. And so I think Boris Johnson's actually right not to rule it out. Shame he didn't say that before. But we all know there are enormous costs whichever way we look, and a lot of factual uncertainties. I mean, doctors, of course, make pronouncements on health. They don't make pronouncements on values, and people sometimes mistakenly think they do. But we all have to make judgments about values. How do we balance public health versus against individual liberty? There's simply no easy way to do it.
But I would even push back on what you're saying, though, Piers, because you're saying about public health versus individual liberty, and you're saying about do no harm. I would say that lockdowns contradicted that do no harm thing. So to me, I'm not against lockdown just because of a personal liberty. I'm against lockdown because all lockdowns do is focus on COVID deaths as a single entity. Well, suicides, mental health, economy decimation. There's so many reasons.
Well, I agree with that, but the principle maybe I didn't put it very well. It's not just do no harm; it's do no net harm. So we agree that, you know, surgery does harm. It might kill the patient, but it's like to do a net good. The debate about COVID was not whether lockdowns caused any harm, because of course they do. It's about the net balance. You know, the lives that might have been saved, the NHS that might have been saved. I mean, these are all empirical disputes with no easy answers. There was a terrible polarisation got going in the early lockdown, which I didn't like at all, because each side seemed to think that the factual considerations they brought to their case were the morally determinating factors, and no argument was very rarely made on either side for that conclusion.
Can I just say one thing, actually? The likelihood of something like this being followed as well, just on a realpolitik level, is almost nil, simply because the Prime Minister himself and many of his friends you know, had parties and what have you. Now, whatever you think about lockdowns, just purely on that level alone, how on earth is he going to get people to go along with it? Quite rightly, you could say, on the one hand, it's hypocrisy, but on the other hand, you could actually say, well, which I tend to believe is they didn't really think those rules were necessary. That's why they did it. I mean, it's not just simply they feel, oh, it doesn't matter, it doesn't apply to us. At one particular level, they sort of thought, actually, you know, we're doing this, but, you know, it's not really necessary. That's far more alarming, actually, when you look what the country went through.
Lots of you guys. Again, a bit of a split response here. Lots of you saying never again, you wouldn't adhere to it. Some of you actually saying, to Jonathan's point actually, that if that's what it takes to save lives, then that's what we need to do. Nigel has written in saying, Michelle, you're lovely, but you're so right-wing. He goes on to say, there's a question, because I was saying I don't see the problem with the non-dom thing, for example. He says it's not about non-dom, it's about trust and values. That's what you say. Nigel, I found this whole concept, by the way, of what's right-wing, what's left-wing, I find it fascinating. Do let me know what you mean by right-wing. Edwin has emailed in as well, saying about the whole green card. He's saying green card suggests lack of commitment to Britain. You go on to say about the non-dom, Sunak's wife is basically evading tax. I do have to say, Edwin, evading tax evasion is illegal. Tax avoidance, of course, isn't. And being a non-dom, it's not illegal. So I did just want to respond to you on that point. Going to take a quick break, though. When we come back, I want to talk to you about... Oh, we're not. So I was going to go to a quick break, Minnie, so I could have a cup of tea, but we're not going to do that. We're going to talk about housing instead. Are you looking to buy a house at the moment? If you are, you might have noticed that the prices have gone sky high. Good news, by the way, if you're selling one, but as I said, less so if you are trying to get on the ladder or buy one. In Canada, the reason I'm discussing this is because in Canada, what they're looking to do is come up with a scheme that would basically mean that foreign buyers wouldn't be able to buy property in Canada. I found that quite interesting because in this country, there are lots of foreign ownership of properties here. And especially, for example, if you go around London or some of the other big cities, you can't help but notice there's a lot of properties with the lights permanently off. You might be sitting there going, well, why does that affect me? Well, it affects all of us, because if these properties, often at the top of the housing ladder, let's be realistic, are being bought by foreign owners, inflated prices, that will have a trickle-down effect to the prices that the rest of us are paying for our properties. Piers, what do you think to this? Do you think that a foreign owner should be able to buy a property in the UK? Do you think that it's inflating the prices? Do you think it's unfair? Do you think we should look to explore what Canada's exploring, which is foreign buyers, you can't buy property in this country?
It's a difficult one. I can't see that any absolute principle is at stake here. Yes, of course, to your general question, should foreigners be allowed to buy property in Britain? Well, yes, of course, why not? Should they be given a right to buy property, or should there be any restriction on who could buy property? Possibly. And there is a problem with, very rich people inflating house prices, driving local residents out, people who can't buy in their own area, the areas they knew, and also when they grew up, and also the risk of social disharmony, if you like, from this happening. So just as we placed limits on who can come to live in the country, and not many people object to that in principle, so we might possibly place limits on who can buy property in the country, but we have to be flexible about it too. I don't see, of course there are problems. In France and Italy, many locals complained that house prices were going up when a lot of British people were buying second homes in the Dordogne or in Tuscany. We have to be sensitive to the social effects of it, but I don't see any absolute principles involved, so sorry.
Peter?
It's a funny one. When we were talking about investment, foreign investment in property, and you mentioned London, and you say you go through some of these areas where the lights are out and they're empty, literally nobody's home. Yes, Knightsbridge, South Kensington, very, very rich places. For the majority of people, and this has been something which just simply has not been faced by our political class for a long time, they keep talking about building houses, they keep talking about the problem with house prices and all the rest of it. What they don't do is talk about the demand side of it, i.e. that you cannot deal with this situation unless you get a proper grip on immigration. It's as simple as that. You know, by focusing on the investment side of things, you're talking about a particular part of the market, and it rather deflects. The fact is that, you know,
I'm not. I'm talking about the whole.
Right. Well,
if the prices at the top go up, that trickles down all the way down.
Well, no, because you see, it's a different dynamic. The fact is, if you have in this country, as we do now, between 250 to 300,000 people coming a year, right? I'm not talking about refugees now. I'm talking about economic migrants. You know, that is going to have a major effect on housing, and yet. You know, when I was on the London Assembly, this would come up time and time again. Somehow we had to be blind when it actually came to this side of the argument, which, of course, to me seems to be one of the main dynamics behind it.
But I'm not sure I get that, because an economic migrant, let's be blunt about what you're talking about. You're probably talking about people that are crossing the channel and all the rest of it, yeah?
No, not necessarily, no. I mean, what it is that this country used to have, 50,000 net migration a year, right up until the mid-90s. Now it's at unprecedented levels. It's become the new normal, even whether people like it or not. That's going to have an effect on things like housing, not just social services, but housing. You know, this is obvious. It's not rocket science. You know? And so, therefore, you have got to look at that too. Will anyone sort of grab that? No, they won't. They won't. They sort of, politicians will stay right away from it, but you're not going to make any progress on this front unless you also look at immigration.
Yeah, the average UK house price, by the way, £276.91. Jonathan, what's your thoughts on all this?
Well, I think it's too easy just to blame it all on immigration and foreigners and coming in, foreigners buying or foreigners coming to this country. The real problem in housing in this country is that young first-time buyers don't have affordable housing. And the main problem is the councils in this country, too many of them, are not building council houses properly or council flats. They're developing other things, using the money in other ways. And private developers who, under various legislation, are supposed to have a certain percentage of the flats in their buildings available to first-time buyers at affordable prices, are not doing that. They rather will sell to luxury buyers or upper middle class people than poor ones. So we have this danger of ghettoisation in London, where increasingly you get Chelsea and Knightsbridge on the one hand and you get poorer boroughs on the other, who are completely separated. And we go back to, I think it was one of the British politicians said, we've had a sort of Sarkozy, attacking Sarkozy, saying we would be like Paris, becoming a city of, you know, really split entities and areas altogether, and slums here and high-rise luxury apartments overlooking the river there. We should do something about our local councils and their attitudes rather than worrying about foreigners coming in who are not the real problem, in my view.
What do you think to that? And by the way, I do think Jonathan comes up with an interesting point. If I can get it on the screen, I'll just show you a quick graph, actually. Because affordability, I mean, OK, I was going to show you that graph on the screen, but if you can see that, you've got better eyesight than me, even with my glasses on there, because it's quite small. But in a nutshell, I mean, look, the average property now costs nearly 8 times that of the average salary. 8 times. I mean, I'm showing my age now, but I remember the days where you could only borrow, I think it was like 3 times your salary.
I remember that.
Yeah. But that's what I mean. Yeah. So I kind of think, you know, so let's have a look now. So in 2020, average white-based earnings are nearly £32,000, right? That's in 2020. And if I look, the average house price is nearly 250 grand. I mean, the point you make, Jonathan, is a good one in terms of affordability. And obviously there's a disconnect between London and the rest of the country. But let me know, by the way, if you're a first-time buyer and you're trying to get onto the housing ladder, how do you manage? How are you doing that? Especially if you're someone that doesn't have a family that can help you with a deposit. Peter, your thoughts?
Yeah, no, just the other thing as well, this phrase, affordable housing, affordable. Do you know that it's a kind of moving definition of this, but I think it's sort of something like 2/3 of the market price makes it affordable or something. I mean, this is sort of fantasy land stuff. I think, obviously, we need more housing. But at the same time, I don't want to see a wonderful green belt being built right over, go anywhere in the country, huge sprawling estates taking root. I mean, the fact is you have to look as well on the numbers of people coming into the country and how that affects housing and house prices. It just seems to be completely obvious to me.
And also rent. I mean, the cost of rent is a very big problem. I know a lot of millennials, people in their late 20s, 30s, who, when I was that age, buying was relatively easy. It really isn't for them, and I feel sorry for them. They're stuck with their parents, not that some parents are very nice and so on, but they can't move on, difficult to have relationships, it's difficult to save. It's not a violation of their rights, it's just a very unfortunate situation to be in.
Indeed. Well, let me know your thoughts on how do we fix the situation with the housing prices in this country. Nigel, the guy that emailed in, said that I was lovely but very right-wing, has emailed in again to say, I'm sorry if I offended you. You didn't offend me at all, Nigel. It's very hard. It's very hard words trying to offend me. I just think your point is a very interesting one. What is right-wing? What is left-wing? Do those labels still apply? What do they even mean? Let me know your thoughts. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk about customer service in this country, or lack of it, I've got to say. So many companies now use COVID as an excuse to provide lame customer service, to put it mildly. We'll be discussing that after the break. I'll see you in a couple of minutes.
On Mark Dolan tonight, my Mark Meets guests are the legendary comedy double act, The Crankies. We'll talk about their long career in showbiz, how they got their big break, just what makes their relationship tick, and what they think of modern comedy. The Crankies, live at 10. In The Big Question, should restaurant menus display a calorie count, or is this the nanny state gone mad? Plus my all-star panel, and in my big opinion, sorry Boris, the public won't put up with another lockdown. See you at 9.
Europe is in the grip of the most devastating humanitarian crisis since World War II.
The people of Ukraine are facing unimaginable suffering
as their homes are destroyed and their loved ones are killed.
Millions of people are being forced to flee for their lives, carrying only their children, their pets, and the clothes on their back.
The pain, loss and destruction grows by the day.
The people of Ukraine urgently need our help.
Already a vast humanitarian operation is underway. Britain's Disasters Emergency Committee, or DEC, brings together 15 leading aid charities to respond to overseas disasters quickly and efficiently. These charities include the British Red Cross, CARE, Oxfam, Save the Children, and World Vision.
Their teams are working on the ground in Ukraine and neighbouring countries to bring vital aid to those who need it most. If you can spare it, your gift to the DEC's humanitarian appeal will go a really long way.
£10 provides essential hygiene supplies for a person for a month.
£50 provides blankets for 4 families.
£100 provides emergency food for 2 families per month.
It's easy to give. You can donate online at dec.org.uk or call the 24-hour donation line on 0370 60 60 900. If you prefer to send a cheque, please post it to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal, PO Box 999, London, EC 3A 3AA. To give £10 on your mobile, simply text the word crisis to 70150. Standard network charges apply for calls, and you must be 16 or over. Texts are charged at the standard network rate, and your £10 donation will be added to your bill.
100% of your donation goes directly to the DEC to save lives and deliver critical support where it's needed.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry. Now until 7 o'clock, my panel, Peter Whittle, the director at the New Culture Forum, Piers Benn, who's a philosopher, and Jonathan Steele, who's an international affairs journalist. Now, according to Citizens Advice, customer service standards at UK energy providers have fallen to their worst levels since 2017. This coincides with soaring energy bills, of course. The charity's research basically found that there's been a drop in customer service across the board. You are not telling me, Jonathan, that I blame it on companies using COVID as an excuse. They have less staff on. They have these stupid recorded messages saying due to unprecedented demand. Come off it. You know what your demand is. Make sure you staff your business accordingly. Am I wrong?
You're absolutely right. Of course, that's no excuse. COVID's no excuse. But the trouble with these calls is that they don't tell you how many people in front of you there are. That's the crucial thing about waiting. If you're told you're second in the queue, you'll carry on waiting. If you're told you're 15th in the queue, you probably won't. So there should be a requirement that these customer service announcements don't just put on terrible music while you wait and wait and wait and no idea how long it's going to be. They should be required in some way
to give you an estimated wait time.
To say you're 3rd or 5th or 10th or 20th in the queue.
Piers?
Well, I've had different experiences. I imagine that a lot of this is anecdotal. I've had quite good experiences with certain things I've ordered online. I've had very prompt and efficient and polite delivery people bringing packets of things that I've ordered. I've also had the queue problem. I'm reminded of a cartoon that's doing the round on social media recently, where a voice says, your call's important to us. Please wait until your call's no longer important to you. And that I think sums up quite a lot of what is the problem. Sometimes it's a kind of structural inefficiency. It's nobody's fault in particular. You have a feeling that there are underpaid people on 0-hours contracts grudgingly doing this, and systems that haven't been upgraded. I tried to phone a hospital to inquire about a patient a few weeks ago. I had to do the rounds. I got taken to lost property. I got taken back to the ward. I mean, it's all complete. That was annoying. And if this person had been very ill, I'd have been very, very angry. So I suspect, people have different anecdotes. Whether COVID's the reason, I just don't know. It's not an excuse, but I imagine it made it difficult to recruit enough people to these centres.
Indeed, Peter?
Yeah, I suppose on a, again, anecdotal level, my own experience in retail, like going into shops, things like that, cafes, I would say that, look, over the past couple of years, people have had the stuffing knocked out of them, right? They really have by this thing. And so I do detect a kind of lethargy in people, a sort of tiredness, which I'm not blaming them for. And therefore, that does absolutely affect things like customer service. It just does.
Well, Scott's, you've just messaged in about companies that still write letters. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, what a strange thing to do in 2022. Why not just email or pick up the telephone? Of course not. They can't pick up the telephone because they don't have the staff. Right, so that is pretty much all we've got time for. I can tell you now, I've created quite a debate on the email about what's right-wing and what's left-wing. Maybe we should do that as a debate one day. Are these kind of labels still relevant in this day and age? Jill has just emailed in saying she's made my mum's chicken pie recipe that I shared with you the other day and she loved it. Good for you guys. Well, that's all we've got time for. Peter, Piers, Jonathan, thank you for your company tonight. Thank you at home for yours. Don't forget, by the way, Jonathan just said he's going to miss the Boris Johnson interview tomorrow morning because he's playing tennis. Worry not, everybody. We've got an app, we've got YouTube. You can catch it up when tennis is finished or whatever you're doing. Have a good weekend, and I'll see you on Monday.
Hello again, Alex Deakin here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. A fine, dry weekend for most. Just don't expect it to be too warm. It's going to be fairly chilly, particularly so in the mornings. This is the bigger picture. We're between low and high pressure with one low to the south that's made for a very wet day over the Channel Islands and some very windy conditions across France. But that's scooting away and we've got northerly winds still. Not as strong as recent days, but still bringing a chill and still bringing showers over parts of England and Wales. Rain showers primarily, but some hail mixed in. Sleet and snow in the showers over northern Scotland, where it may just turn icy. For most, though, the night becomes dry and clear and cold. Temperatures close to freezing in urban areas. Rural spots will be a touch below. So, yes, a cold, frosty start to the weekend. Still a few showers over northern Scotland, and we'll see cloud increasing across the Western Isles with some more showers coming in here later on. Snow over the Highlands, perhaps down to lower levels. A sprinkling of showers for England and Wales, maybe Northern Ireland, but for most it's a dry and a bright day. But it is still chilly, temperatures below average for the time of year, but the winds are continuing to ease down, so it won't feel quite as cold as the past couple of days. It'll turn quite cold on Saturday nights. Again, largely clear skies, still some wintry showers over northern Scotland, so again, it could be a little icy here, but generally it's a frosty but fine start to Sunday. Plenty of sunshine on offer on Sunday. Some cloud will develop through the day. Certainly for Northern Ireland, it's likely to turn grey with the threat of a bit of patchy rain coming in here by the end of the day. But for most, it'll be